Welcome. This particular yin yoga sequence will have an emphasis on the upper body, so the shoulders and the neck. The yin postures in the sequence will include Side Sphinx, a Restorative Fish Pose, Twisted Roots, and Quarter Dog Pose, which is similar to Puppy Dog Pose. Very useful props for Restorative Fish Pose would be a very firm bolster. But of course, not all of us have one. So what I've done is I've taken a couple of firm blankets and folded them to emulate the shape of a bolster. And you can construct this shape out of anything that you have. If you have pillows, or if you have towels or something, you can make this shape if you don't have a bolster. Otherwise, if you do have a bolster, grab it because it will be useful for restorative fish. Other props might be a blanket roll for modification if some of the postures don't fit you. Also, just regular pillows and blankets for pressure points. The theme for class will be the two farthest major planets in our solar system, the planets Uranus and Neptune. This practice starts off with a little bit of grounding and then somewhat of a yang warm-up before we get into the yin sequence proper, the long passive holds here. So I'm going to recommend for grounding wide-legged child's pose. I call this pose warrior 4. So you come to hands and knees and you bring your knees pretty wide, so maybe about mat width apart. Maybe you can get your big toes to touch, maybe they don't touch with your feet, and then you inch your hips back towards your heels to wherever they stop for you. And then when you find that stopping point, you lean your torso forward and extend your arms forward. For some of us, this might be kind of comfortable. For some of us, maybe not. You can always use padding to help make this a more accessible posture. You can use, I was going to go for the bolster, but maybe I'm using the pillows. And you can put these under your torso or under your hips to help alleviate painful pressure points. If you have discovered that this posture just doesn't work for you, i.e. it's painful, then instead of just kind of grounding in this posture, make your way onto your back. Bend your knees and hug them in so you can wrap your hands around your thighs and just hug your legs in as far as they go here. This is actually an alternative form. It's just, if you think about it, this posture is kind of just flipped 180 degrees. So this might be more accessible because you can release the knees, you can release the ankles, and you can just pull in the upper thighs as far as they go here. Otherwise, if you're finding wide-legged child's pose to be okay to ground in, then ground here. Spend a few moments to check in with your breath. Check in with your thoughts, with the present moment, the external things going on around you, like the air temperature, the sounds that you can hear. And just maybe notice your back body. Maybe notice, because it's a little bit open here, and you can feel your breath. You can feel your torso change shape as you breathe here. For some of you, for those whose heads make it to the ground, you can do a little bit of a subtle energy exercise here. Since your forehead is touching the ground, and if it isn't, maybe put a prop there so that it can. You can visualize yourself taking all of your stressful thoughts and allowing them to drain down into the ground. Let Mother Earth take care of them for a while. Let yourself be relieved of them. And don't worry too much about them. I'm sure they will probably return at some point. But for now, just let them go. Let your breath go. So gentle, natural inhales. Gentle, natural exhales. If you wish, you can try to lengthen the exhale a little bit longer than the inhale. And give yourself permission to be here. And then at some point, slowly make your way up. Make yourself way into a comfortable seat. It can be cross-legged, or it can be sitting back on your heels. We'll do a little bit of a shoulder warm-up here. We'll start out with a twist here. So take your arms out either side and make a big sweeping circle up towards the ceiling. Grow long through your torso all the way up through your fingertips. So you're feeling very long here and stable as you're seated here. And then lower your arms out to either side, out to shoulder height, and extend, and then use your muscles to kind of lengthen each arm farther away from each other. So you're trying to grow long through the sides of the arm. And then begin to twist to the right with those extended arms. When you stop, when you find that stuck place here, then you can begin to lower your arms down to the ground. And then maybe lift your torso up and lengthen it, and then see if you can twist it a little bit more deeply. Head can be neutral, or you can turn your head to look over that back shoulder, maybe for a breath here. You can leave the head there, or you can try to slowly move your head back to the left. So your torso is still in the twist, but you're moving your head and neck to look over the other shoulder, and just notice how that changes the sensations in your neck, in your shoulders here when you do that. And if that creates too much pain, then just keep your head neutral. Otherwise, bring yourself back to center, hands on either side of your torso. Inhale, and sweep your arms up again. Go tall again. So you're lengthening through your arms and through your torso, getting really long and tall here. And then extend your arms out to either side. Pause when they reach shoulder height, and then try to lengthen through the arms, through the hands, through the fingertips, go long through the shoulders here. And then begin to twist to the other direction, and you can start to lower your arms down for a little bit of stability here. And then set up your twist. You're kind of going deep into the twist until you stop, and it doesn't have to be a deep twist, particularly if you haven't done a lot of yoga yet today. It's just your stopping point here. Head can stay neutral. You can look over that back shoulder if it's okay with your neck. See where your neck stops here. You can stay here, or you can try this move where you stay in the twist, but you're moving your neck and your head in the opposite direction until it won't go anymore here. Maybe stay here for a breath. And then gently bring yourself back to center. And then you can kind of shake your shoulders out. A little bit of a yang kind of core exercise here. I call this Forearm Plank Pose. So come to hands and knees. Nice symmetric table pose. And then bring yourself down onto your forearms. So at least shoulder width apart with the forearms. We'll try to move into plank here. So start with one leg, extend it back, press the toes into the ground, lift the knee. So leg is strong, torso is strong, shoulders and arms are strong. You can stay here or try the other leg here. Do both legs here so that you're in a full plank position here. So arms, shoulders, strong. Torso is toning, legs are toning here. And then just see if you can stay here for 4 breaths. And you can always put your knees down if this gets too intense. So maybe a couple more breaths here. And then go ahead and put your knees down onto the ground. And then from here, come to sitting with legs out in front. Do a little bit of an exercise here. Some more core work, if you will, but it's also intense up in the shoulders and the arms, i.e. the upper arm. Here, we'll try reverse table. So bend your knees, put your feet on the ground about hip width apart, so a few inches between your feet. And then hands behind you. See if you can turn your hands with the fingers pointed away from you here. That doesn't work, that's okay. You can just put your hands with your fingers pointed forward here. Root through your hands, get strong through your arms and your feet. And then on an inhale, use your muscles to see if you can lift, see how high you can lift your hips. Maybe they only go a few inches. Maybe they go a little bit more. If your neck is sensitive, keep your neck tucked. If it's okay with your neck, you can lean your head back here. Stay for a breath. And then when you're ready with control, slowly lower yourself back down. Now we'll do that again. So you can do that for another cycle, maybe hold it for a breath or two. Or you can try something that's usually a little bit more difficult for most people, and that's reverse plank pose. So legs are straight, they're toning because we want to keep them straight. Point your feet and your toes forward. Either keep your hands with fingers pointed away or turn them around with the fingers pointed same direction as your toes here. Grow strong through your shoulders and your arms. Same procedure, this time lift up your hips as high as they go, and you're kind of just balancing on your heels here. And then again, head can stay forward. That feels better for you. Or you can lean your head back here. One more breath. And then very gently lower yourself down to the ground here. And you can kind of shake your shoulders out here. So that was a little bit yang here. We'll get into the first yin posture. The first long-held yin posture is called Side Sphinx. So for Side Sphinx, it's a lateral bend. You'll make your way onto your side, legs extended out, stacked on each other. So I'm on my left side here. And then take your forearm, place your elbow and your forearm on the floor, kind of roughly underneath your shoulder, or you might have to move it around for taste. And just like Sphinx pose, you want to relax through your torso to let your spine sag. Your spine and your torso is sagging from your shoulder down due to gravity. And that might set up some pressure, some sensation somewhere. And you can take this right hand and put it wherever you need it for stability. Sometimes this is a little bit too balancy. Other things you can do is you can bend the top leg, put the back foot down. This all helps to maintain the balance, because that's not part of the posture. It's this subtle angle that's part of the posture. And then we'll stay here for a few minutes. Now, if this is too hard, most of us feel some pressure going on in the shoulder, and of course, that's one of the points. Besides the pressure, gentle pressure we're feeling in the bent torso, we're also getting a little bit of a workout in the shoulder in that it's pressurized. And that's the point, but if this is painful, you can always do banana pose instead. So banana pose is just a lateral bend where you're lying on the ground in a supine position and you just work yourself into a crescent shape here. Another alternative is if you don't feel anything in Side Sphinx, you can try a more intense posture known as Side Seal. And for Side Seal, you bring yourself you just lean into your straight, elbow locked, straight left arm that you might have to adjust for taste here. And that should give you a little bit more pressure in the shoulder, probably feel a little bit more pressure somewhere in the torso due to the lateral bend. But if you're feeling a little bit inside Sphinx, then maybe just come back here into Side Sphinx. So I normally stay 3 or 4 minutes in a posture. We've been here for a minute, so a couple more minutes here. You have the option to come out of a posture whenever you need to, or whenever your body tells you it's done. So it might be only a minute or 2 minutes here. I'll go through the principles of a yin practice. The first one is called finding your edge. So you move your body into a particular shape. You go until you reach your stopping point, wherever that is for you. That's when you start feeling pressure or stuck or tight or whatever words that you use for that. That's your stopping point. And that's where you stop. That's your edge. Second principle is called stillness. Once we've found an edge that's appropriate for us, then we try to stay. We try to cultivate stillness and patience and fortitude. We get in touch with our breath. We get in touch with how we're feeling, not only just physically, but mentally, emotionally. This is going to be challenging here. And then The third principle is time. So now we stay a while. We stay at that edge, which might change, in which case we allow ourselves to go either deeper or less deep or come out and rest. So we're keeping track of where our edge is at, and it can change with time. 3 minutes in a posture might not feel the same as 30 seconds in a posture. You might have different edges depending on how long you hold a pose here. So we just have a few more seconds on this side of Side Sphinx or Side Seal or Banana Pose, whatever modification that you took. And then when you're ready to come out, maybe use the other hand to kind of brace you as you slowly lower all the way down. You can bend your knees. When you're ready, slowly bring yourself up to seated. Shake out any residual stuckness or reverberation from that side. And then set yourself up for the other side of this lateral bend. Now, if that was too hard on your shoulder or neck, then maybe think about doing banana pose. If you weren't feeling anything, then maybe do side seal here. So body is stretched out now in the other direction. I've got the opposite shoulder here. So now my torso, my spine is bent in the other direction. So I'm getting a subtle lateral bend here because I'm relaxing the muscles in my torso to let everything just kind of sag down. That sets up pressure in my spine and different parts of my torso and definitely in my shoulder here. So try this. And again, if you're feeling a little bit too bouncy, you got one hand and you got a foot to kind of help you balance here. I guess I should have said what to do with your head. Well, you can hold your head up. That can get tedious. You can let your head hang. So you have to just decide kind of where your head and neck have to be here. And we'll go here for a few more minutes on this side. Again, you have the option of side seal, which is this arm straight and locked, rather than side sphinx. But I'm going to stay here in side sphinx. And get in touch with your breath. Notice if you found your edge. And allow yourself to just reside. I say we do the postures or hold the postures, but in yin, I think a better word is you're residing in a posture. You're just staying here for time and allowing that to be okay. You have nowhere to go and nothing to do other than to keep track of your sensations, your edge, your breath. That said, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about a few more of the major planets that exist in our solar system that rotate around our sun. So I'm going to talk about two planets at once. I'm going to talk about the farthest major gas giants in the solar system, so much farther away from the sun than the Earth. These are the two planets, Uranus and Neptune. Now, they often get lumped together because those two planets have a lot of similarities. They also have a lot of differences. So some of the similarities is they are very far away. They're so far away from the sun that it's very cold in that region of space. And this is one region they're known collectively as the ice giants. So water cannot exist as a vapor or as liquid water. It can only exist as ice in that, unless there's something that's creating some warmth. This is why they're known as ice giants, although we'll discover later that we speculate that maybe there's not a lot of solid ice in the planets themselves because they're made up of other things. So Uranus is 1.8 billion miles from the sun. Just to recap, the Earth is 93 million. So if you think about that, Uranus is much farther than the sun. Neptune is almost 1 billion miles farther. So it's 2.8 billion miles from the sun. Because of this, both of the planets get very little warmth or energy from the sun. They're just too far away here. They're also very similar in size. We have about 5-6 long more breaths here on this side, if that's appropriate. they're similar in size and mass. So Uranus is about 13 times the mass of the Earth. So of course both of them much more massive. 13, somewhere between 13 to 15 times as massive as the Earth. Neptune is about 17 times as massive as the Earth here. And their compositions, at least in the cloud tops, are similar. So both of them, since they're gas giants, their upper atmospheres are made mainly of hydrogen and helium. But their color comes from the trace other elements, mainly water, ammonia, and methane. And in fact, that's why both planets are pale blue in color, is because of how light is absorbed and reflected by the trace amounts of methane in the atmosphere, even though that's not the major constituent in the upper atmosphere. And that's why they tend to absorb a lot of red light. And so more blue light and greenish light gets scattered, and so that's what we see, is we see the bluish greenish tinge, and that's why both planets have this bluish tinge to them. So we're slowly coming out of this side sphinx. So maybe use your left hand to release your right arm. Make your way down onto the ground. Maybe stay here for a moment just to see what the rebound feels like. But when you feel ready, you can bend your knees and start to make your way up to seated. And when you get up to seated, if your shoulders need a break, maybe just do some gentle shoulder rolling here. We will take a break with our shoulders, possibly, with this next yin posture known as Restorative Fish Pose. So this is I call it the restorative version because I will use a bolster, although you can, one form is to just do this without a bolster too, but if you don't have a bolster, then if you have a pillow or a blanket construction, this is where you get this blanket here. So here's the bolster. You'll lie back on the bolster. This is a yin posture for the neck. So if you have a neck injury or a sensitive neck, maybe there's something else that you would like to do here, but this can be pretty gentle here. So you'll lie with your back on the bolster, and the idea is for your head and your neck to be just far enough off of the bolster so that the head can touch down on the ground. By the way, if it's a hard ground and you want a little bit of comfort underneath your head, you can always take a blanket and place a blanket underneath your head for a little bit of softness. So the idea is we're allowing the head to tip back to get a very gentle stretch in the neck. For a lot of us, this is probably okay. For some of us, maybe this is too severe. So you can always add padding, maybe add 2 blankets. So you get enough height that the little bit of your head tipping back is okay. So you might have to play around with this here. So this is the basic posture. Legs relaxed, arms relaxed, your head just tilted back, and then you just stay here with your head still. I'm kind of bobbing mine around because I'm talking, but once you get settled here, you'll just stay here. Now, if you're looking for a modification, maybe you want to multitask and do something with your legs. So legs can be, like I said, just extended out. Maybe you can put them in a butterfly position. You get a mild hip opener. What I would suggest is, how about an internal rotation with the hips? So knees are bent, feet are on the floor, and then walk the feet away from each other, maybe to the sides of your mat or farther, and let your knees fall together, if they can do that here. And let this be mild in the hips, but you're getting a gentle internal rotation hip opener when you do that too, and then you can just stay here while you're residing in this posture. So that's an alternative. A third alternative is, maybe this isn't intense enough for you and maybe you want more shoulder work. So what you can do is you can actually just do regular old Hatha yoga fish pose without any props. And so to do that, just take the bolster away. Leaning back, put your forearms on the floor with your hands pointed forward. Move your elbows in towards each other as far as they go. Maybe hands end up underneath your hips here. And then kind of arch your spine. So you're trying to make a back bend here. So you're lifting your sternum up towards the ceiling, and then you just lean your head back. And then release until your torso is stacked on your arms. This might work for some people. This might not. You can almost go into kind of a yin attitude with that, because if you are stacked on your arms, then you don't have any muscles engaged here. Otherwise, for the rest of us, we'll be doing kind of our regular restorative fish pose here. So just another minute here in this posture. Turns out all the major gas giants in our solar system actually have rings, a ring system. Saturn is the most famous for this, but it turns out Uranus has a ring system and Neptune has a ring system, because all of these major planets have a system of tiny shepherd moons that help to gravitationally keep these rings aligned, and Uranus and Neptune are no exception. They too have these shepherd moons. And so when the spacecraft Voyager 2, which is the only spacecraft that visited both planets by, it detected these very thin rings around both planets, and it also discovered a few more of these shepherd moons. So again, all the major gas giants have their own system, a mini solar system of moons around them. And we keep discovering more. I forget how many moons that Uranus and Neptune have. It's probably, each one of them probably has near 20 moons. These tiny little moons that are only a few miles across. The moons, it turns out, most of the moons are made mainly of ice, mainly of water ice. So that's maybe where we get this idea of the planets being called ice giants, because their moons are made out of water ice, out of ammonia ice, and out of methane and even nitrogen ice. One of the major moons of Neptune, Triton. Triton has a surface made of solid nitrogen ice, and sometimes the nitrogen gets heated underneath the surface and it bubbles up and creates geysers. So Triton, a very interesting moon of Neptune here. So just a few more breaths here in restorative fish pose, and then we'll come out. Now, if you've been here the full time and your neck is a little bit sensitive, my suggestion is reach back with your arms, clasp your hands behind your head. Use your arms to lift your head up and brace it. Once you've done that, then you can decide how you want to roll off your bolster and bring yourself up to seated. And then when you get up to seated, clear your mat of props. The next yin pose is a pose known as twisted roots here. Twisted roots is a twist. It's a pine twist with the legs and a gentle hip opener. So for twisted roots, the first side of it, you'll start out on your back. Again, upper body's comfortable. Knees are bent, feet are on the floor, and then take your right leg and bring it in towards your torso. Wrap the upper right thigh around the upper left thigh so that the right shin's on the left side of the left shin here in kind of twisted root legs. Sometimes these are called eagle legs. For some of you, you might be able to wrap your right foot behind your left shin. I can't do that, so this is as far as I go. So if you want to do that and that feels great, go ahead and do that here. And then For some of you, you might want to shift your hips over to the right a little bit, just to make it easier to stack the hips. So I'm going to lower my knees over to the left and stack this right hip on top of the left hip. For some people, shifting your hips over works. For some people, it doesn't, so you have to experiment here. So maybe draw your knees in and then guide the knees over to the left. And I'm trying to keep my right shoulder down towards the ground here. It might not stay on the ground, it might float here. So this is twisted roots. It's twisted roots in that we're trying to create a spinal twist here. And if you need some support underneath your legs because they're floating, then place some support here. Oh, I'm lucky, I happen to have a couple blankets here, right where I need them for my knees to feel stable, although it's okay for my knees to float too here. Right arm is out to the right in an outrigger position. If you want a little bit more intensity in your upper body, experiment with sweeping that arm higher up, just to see how that feels, just to see slowly so you can see the changing and feel the changing sensations in that arm. If it's too intense, maybe just keep the arm out to the side. Head and neck can stay neutral, or if you want a complete twist in the spine, you can turn your head to the right so that your spine is in a complete twist from the low spine all the way up to the crown of the head. And then it will stay here for a couple more minutes. Now, I've talked about some of the similarities between Uranus and Neptune. Now it's time to talk about the differences, because now that we've studied them more, they tend to be pretty different. So Uranus is unusual because it's actually tipped on its side, so its polar axes don't point up and down, if you will, like the rest of the planets in the solar system. It points on the side. It's almost rotated, well, technically it's rotated 98 degrees. So you can think of it as lying on its side, and it rotates on its side. It has its ring system is on its side here. So that's really unusual. It makes scientists ask, well, what happened? Why is it on its side? Most planets, when they formed, they were spinning like a top in the same direction that the whole solar system orbits in. And Uranus doesn't do that. It's tilted on its side. So what's suspected is that early in the formation of Uranus, some other body, Earth-sized body, collided with Uranus and knocked it over on its side in its early formation. And another consequence is Uranus is actually much colder. So Uranus and Neptune are both big. They have big cores that generate some heat. But Uranus's core is much smaller and colder than Neptune. And that makes the entire planet colder, even though it's closer to the sun. And it's speculated that the collision that turned Uranus on its side also might have dissipated a lot of the internal heat in its core at some time, which makes it a lot more colder, a lot more lifeless than Neptune is. Because when you look at Neptune is much hotter than Uranus. Neptune generates a lot of its own heat because it still has a very hot, active core. And this creates gigantic storms in its upper atmosphere that creates gigantic wind bands and cloud bands. They're much more characteristic. Uranus has an upper atmosphere that's pretty bland. You can't see much in there because there's not as much going on, although there are some storms and winds on Uranus. In Neptune, they're much more pronounced. And Neptune is not tipped over on its side like Uranus is. We're only here for about we're only tipped over on our side here for about 3 or 4 more breaths here. Now, it was thought that Uranus and Neptune were just like Jupiter and Saturn, mostly hydrogen and helium. And indeed, their upper atmospheres are very similar to Jupiter and Saturn. But it's thought that they both had water ice cores at some point. And that's one of the major constituents that we think they're still made out of. So somewhere throughout the planet, there is still some sort of water ice, or liquid water near the centers where it's warmer there. We need to come out of this side of twisted roots. So when you're ready, slowly bring yourself up. Untwist the twisted root legs. You can stay here for a moment to rebound. You can bring your legs in. You can do waterfall pose for a while, whatever you need to do to kind of just reverberate from that twist. Then we'll do the other side of twisted roots. So maybe center yourself off this side. And then bring the left leg in. Wrap the left leg around the thigh of the right leg here. Make your version of twisted roots. Oh, and by the way, if the twisted root legs don't work, just keep them parallel and just do the twist with the legs parallel here. Bring the legs in, maybe shift the hips over if you need to, and then maybe guide the knees over to the right. Left shoulder is trying to stay near the floor. It doesn't have to. You can actually pad that left shoulder if you need to. And then head can stay neutral, or you can look along your left arm, or you can play around with moving this left arm up and down, maybe finding a little bit more interesting point to keep that left arm in. You can maybe feel some pressure in the left arm and the upper left torso. That's why, even though this seems to be a hip opener and a spinal twist, it's also an upper body and a shoulder opener, this posture. And we'll stay here for a few minutes. It is believed that both Neptune and Jupiter Neptune and Uranus have a much higher concentration of materials like water, ammonia, and methane. A higher concentration of those materials deeper in the planet than on the surface. On the surface, their compositions are pretty similar to Saturn and Jupiter. It's just mainly hydrogen and helium. But we think since they're farther out, instead of developing large rocky cores, most of the solid material that Neptune and Uranus initially had was actually ices, water ice, ammonia ice, methane ice, that helped give the planet some mass. I think it's thought that maybe Uranus and Neptune do have an iron rocky core, each about the mass or size of the Earth. And then the rest of the material is either gas or maybe some kind of metallic liquid, like liquid hydrogen, deep down underneath the thick atmosphere, which we can't penetrate very deeply because the atmosphere is just obscuring anything underneath. So all we can do is take magnetic measurements and density measurements, and then just try to infer from what other material is around them. And of course, if you look at their moons, you see their moons are made up of entirely of ices here. So about one more minute on this side here. Neptune has some of the fastest winds in its upper atmosphere. So the winds have been clocked at about 1,500 mile an hour winds in the upper atmospheres of Neptune. And those are generated and created by Neptune's warm core. So on Earth, our storms are created, our weather systems on Earth are created by heating from the sun, since the Earth is so close to the sun. That's not true of planets that are far away. They don't get enough heat from the sun to create weather systems. The weather systems on these planets are created by the planets themselves. Now, both Uranus and Neptune rotate fairly rapidly. They both only take one day, one of their days is only 17 of our hours. So, and since they're fairly large, that's a pretty rapid rotation rate. That rotation and the fact that their cores are warm. Warm is an understatement. Their cores are actually hot. Because they're hot, they're generating heat and it bubbles up through the atmosphere and it creates these high winds and weather systems, which is very characteristic of all the gas giants. Jupiter, Saturn also have these high winds and weather systems. It's just interesting that these cold planets far away from the sun also have these high winds and weather systems too. Much more pronounced on Neptune, which is really far away. They're there, these supersonic winds. And indeed, Neptune has a great blue spot occasionally, which is similar to Jupiter's great red spot here. We're done with this side of twisted roots, so slowly bring yourself back to center. Untwist your twisted roots. Maybe spend a little bit of time to reverberate here. When you're ready, slowly bring yourself up to seated. When you get there, find a comfortable seat. We'll do a little bit of a yang counter pose here before we get into the quarter dog poses here. Extend your arms out long. Nice, long, toned torso here. So nice neutral spine. And then with your arms out long, start making little circles. So your arms are nice and rigid. There's some toning going on in the arms. And you just make these little circles with your fingertips. Maybe go one way, 4 circles, and then switch directions. Go the other way, 4 circles. And then when you get done with those 4 circles, point your fingertips up and act like you're pressing your palms against 2 pillars, trying to push the pillars away. So you're getting really strong in your arms and you're pushing in the opposite directions. And even though you're just doing this in air, you can maybe feel that tension, that traction that runs down both arms here. And maybe just notice that for one more breath here. So torso has some integrity here. And then go ahead and release. And again, you might have to roll your shoulders around a little bit here. So the next yin posture is a back bend, upper spine, and shoulder opener, known as quarter dog pose. Now, quarter dog pose is a cousin to puppy dog pose or to melting heart pose. There'll be an alternative here, so watch the demo for quarter dog. Quarter dog pose is an asymmetrical posture. So we have 2 sides to do here. So you start out in a table pose. So knees kind of nice, hip width apart underneath your hips. And then you start walking, actually walk your left arm out. And then bend your right arm, your right elbow. Bring your right forearm perpendicular to your left arm. Set the right forearm down onto the floor. And then lower your torso, continue to reach out with the left arm. And then soften your torso, let it sink into a back bend here. And then you can spiral crawl your left fingers as far forward or as far over as you need to until you're feeling kind of some lovely pressure in this arm. It doesn't have to be too much because we'll be here for a little while here. So this is quarter dog on the left side here. So torso is soft. Our spine is trying to melt into just this gentle back bend. And we can feel the pressure in the upper arms, the upper torso. And we're trying to make the head and neck as comfortable as possible. So the head and neck might be in front of the bent right arm. Maybe it's resting on the bent right arm. Maybe it has to turn to one side or another, or maybe you have to grab a pillow for your head and your neck. But this is the pose. And this is where we'll stay for however long you want to stay, or maybe 3 minutes or so. So some alternatives to this posture. You can do full melting heart posture. So both arms are forward in melting heart posture. And you'll just have to do that twice, since we'll be doing the other side of quarter dog. If this is too much on your shoulders, but you want to get some pressure in your upper back, an alternative is to take a blanket roll and just lie back on it. I call this heart opening on a blanket. roll. So you take the blanket roll, put it crossways, and then you lay back with your upper torso lying on top of the blanket roll. So I have the blanket roll a little bit underneath my armpits here, or my shoulder blades are kind of on the blanket roll, and then you relax here. Maybe you need a blanket for your head or a pillow for your head. And your shoulders are released in this pose, but you're getting some traction in your thoracic spine here. And so maybe that's all you want right now here. Otherwise, if you're still hanging out in quarter dog pose, maybe another minute here in this pose. So the ancients didn't know about Uranus and Neptune. The ancient peoples only knew about the planets they could see with their naked eye, which is all the planets up through Saturn. And then after that, the planets were too faint to see with the naked eye. So Uranus and Neptune actually had to be discovered. The other planets were known since antiquity because people saw them throughout human history. But Uranus was the first planet that was actually discovered. And it was discovered by an astronomer in England by the name of William Herschel. And he discovered it in 1781. He was actually from Germany, but he had moved to England with his sister, and they were operating an observatory there. So just about one more breath here. And then maybe root through your right hand, maybe your left hand, slowly work yourself up. And you can work yourself back, maybe into a child's pose. Maybe arms are back so shoulders can melt forward here. And just stay here for a breath or two as a counter pose. We have the other side of quarter dog coming up. I can either do another round of melting heart or just stay on your blanket roll if you're doing heart opening on a block. Otherwise, come back to table, and then from here, it's the left arm that bends and is 90 degrees from the right arm, and you'll lower your torso down and reach the right arm out in front of you. And then you can adjust both arms. So this arm is reaching out, the torso is relaxing and sinking, and you're resting your head in some sort of comfortable is relative here, most comfortable manner here, on your left arm or behind your left arm. And then you stay here, check in with your breath and your physical sensations, hang out here for a few more minutes. So William Herschel was actually looking for comets, but instead he found Uranus, and after he studied the motion of Uranus and the fact that it had no tail, he realized that it wasn't a comet that he found, it was actually a planet. And since he was working for the King of England, who at the time was George III, he wanted to name the planet after the king, so he initially called it George's Star. That's what he christened it. But of course, after a while, astronomers decided to stick with this theme of Roman and Greek mythology that was used to name all of the known planets. So they decided to name it Uranus because Uranus was the father, considered the god of the heavens, and Uranus was the father of Cronus. This is in Greek mythology. So Cronus was a Greek titan who was the father of the Greek god Zeus. Now this ties in with the other planets because the Roman name for Zeus is Jupiter, and the Roman name for Cronus is Saturn. So Saturn is the father of Jupiter, and it follows from logic that Uranus is the father of Saturn. So that's why it's got its name Uranus here. Neptune, of course, is named for the Roman god of the sea, whose Greek name is Poseidon. So Neptune they ran out of fathers, so they took the brother of Jupiter, and the brother of Jupiter was actually Neptune here. So that's how Neptune got his name. Now Neptune was discovered much later. Neptune was discovered in about 1846, and it was discovered through deviations in Uranus's orbit. So Uranus was not following its orbit the way they predicted. And so they used its erratic orbit to calculate where a theoretical planet might actually be that's affecting the orbit of Uranus. And when they pointed a telescope in that direction, voila, there was Neptune. So that's the first time where science had a predictive power of actually discovering a new planet based on the gravitational deviations of another planet here. So we're trying to come out of quarter dog here. So engage your arms, slowly bring yourself up, and then come back out. And at some point, be slow and gentle. At some point, make your way to seated. And then when you get to seated, that's the long, last really intense yin posture. We'll do a little bit of shoulder exercises as a bit of integration before we settle down into our resting pose, into Shavasana here. So reach your arms up to either side. Turn your palms to face up, bend at the elbows, and bring your fingertips in towards your shoulders. We'll do some elbow rolling here. So swoop both of your elbows down and towards each other in front of your torso, as far as they go until they don't go anymore. And then swoop and move them up and behind you as far as they go. So you're actually exploring the motion of your shoulders here as you make a complete circle here. Maybe make 3 more of these circles. And maybe go slowly so you can kind of explore what range of motion you have in your shoulders, even though it's kind of the elbows that seem to be doing the work here. When you've done 3 or 4 of these, switch directions. Go the opposite way and do 3 or 4 circles in the opposite direction. Again, be slow and gentle with yourself here. This is just to get a feel of how your shoulders are doing after all that yin work here. And then when you're finally complete with that, go ahead and make your way onto your back. Since this was mainly upper body work, we'll just integrate with happy baby pose here as a final integration. So nice comfortable torso, bend your knees, draw them into your chest. Bring your knees out to either side of your rib cage and then weave your arms in between your knees. See if you can clasp your shins, your ankles, or the bottoms of your feet. And then try to point your feet up towards the ceiling. Use your arms to kind of gently pull your feet, your shins, your knees down towards the floor on either side of your torso. And you can just stay here in stillness, or you can try things like rock back and forth. You can try to straighten one leg and the other, maybe both legs here. Just any kind of gentle motion. And then at some point, bring your knees back together. Maybe give your knees a final hug. If there's any other movements or motions you'd like to do, then go ahead and do those. And then begin to settle yourself down into your version of Shavasana, or resting pose. Again, it can be any of your favorite restorative postures. Use as many props as you would like. Or maybe you're chilly, use blankets for warmth. Use pillows as necessary. If your low back is achy, you can place a bolster, or if you have this blanket roll, place the blanket roll underneath bent knees. And then legs are far enough apart so that they can relax and release, are comfortable. Same with your arms here. And then when you feel stable, when you feel supported, begin to allow yourself to soften and to release. allow yourself to kind of begin to melt into the floor. Release your head, so soften the components up in your head. Release your jaw and your tongue, the entire inside of your mouth. Soften your lips, the skin around your mouth, your chin, your nose, your left cheek and your right cheek. Soften the skin around your ears. Soften the muscles around your eye sockets, so both eyes soft, and release the muscles around your left eye socket and your right eye socket. Release the tension between your eyes, your third eye. Release it up in your forehead and your temples, all the way up to the crown of your head. Let it be soft. Go inside your head. Let your brain be soft. Let your thoughts be defocused and fuzzy. No need to analyze your thoughts right now. Let them just drift. Oh, they will be there. You'll notice them. But whatever the nature of your thoughts are, just allow and accept them, and allow them to just drift in and out. Soften down through your neck, tops of your shoulders, backs of your shoulder blades. Soften each arm, so release your right arm, your right palm, your right fingers. Left arm, left palm, and left fingers. Spend a moment here to notice your fingertips. So notice the tip of each finger on each hand. Right hand, left hand. Maybe you can notice some subtle sensation in the tips of those fingers, some tingling or some energy. Continue to release down through the rest of your torso. Soften your rib cage, soften your abdomen. Release your hips and your thighs, your knee joints, your shins and calves, your ankles, heels and soles and tops of your feet. Relax all of your toes. Notice your toes. Notice the tips of each toe. Notice the energy there. It can be subtle, but with stillness, with quiet, focus, feel your life energy way down there on the tips of your toes. So far away from your head, and yet still you down there. Release, relax, and surrender your body-mind 100%. Visualize yourself, pale blue planet at the edge of the solar system. Puffy and soft, and making lazy orbits around a distant star. Just being happy in the notion that you are you. Begin to deepen your breath. Start to make small movements with fingers, toes, Expand that motion into wrists, into ankles. Keep moving that motion up into limbs, into legs, into arms. Maybe you can start to gently rock softly your head, your neck from side to side. And when you're feeling ready, you gently bend your knees and roll over onto one side. When you get there, stay there for a few breaths and cultivate a deep sense of gratitude for your practice and your efforts, but also a deep sense of gratitude for you, your unique embodiment in this universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you feel ready, come up to a comfortable seat. Find your inner ground, reestablish some roots. Bring your hands together at heart center. I'll end practice with Om. You can either join in or simply listen. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.